Hi, it's Andy again, and we are concluding our look this week at the five great C's. And just to recap, the C's also align with the steps that we have as a part of the process that we use to fulfill our strategy as Fairfax Baptist Church. And those steps are a part of my ministry, named the For All Ministries. So so far this week, we've looked at the Great Calling, which corresponds to the step of learning, and that is based upon Matthew 4:19, where Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." We looked at the Great Confession that Peter made, and that corresponds to the step of living, live, and that's based upon Matthew 16, where Peter makes the great declaration that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I talked about how to truly confess then means that we we present ourselves to God, confessing that we are His, and therefore we live accordingly. Of course, we fail in that. That's why we need Jesus. But then the third of the great C's was the Great Commandment, and that is based upon Matthew 22 verses 37 through 40. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, and therefore that corresponds to the third L of love. Yesterday, the fourth L, which is lead, I think I forgot to mention that in yesterday's video, corresponds to the Great Commission. That's in Matthew 28 verses 18 through 20, where we are told to make disciples by going, by baptizing, and by teaching others to observe. Now, again, I'm using Matthew for this just to stay in one of the Gospels, not necessarily, not because these are not covered in other Gospels, and like I really like the way Mark 12 covers the love aspect, but I'm stating Matthew just so we can see how this unpacks. And so far, what we've done is we've looked sequentially at the life of Jesus. We've looked sequentially at the gospel according to Matthew in all of these. Again, learn from Matthew 4 and live from Matthew 16 and love from Matthew 22 and the Great Commission of leading in Matthew 28. Today, we back up to Matthew 25. And it's a parable that many people are familiar with. Many people are quite familiar with it, but I want to focus here because there is one more great C besides our calling and our confession and our commandment and our commission. There's one more great C that we need to talk about, and that is when life on earth is done, there is also a fifth L, which I don't talk about very often, and that is that we leave. So learn, live, love, lead, but then we all leave. And Jesus left, and the original disciples left, and countless people have left. But the mission goes on. Why? Because subsequent people beyond the initial disciples have continued to learn and to live and to love and to lead. And of course, then they leave, and then there's a new generation. And one day we will leave as well. And when we leave, when we experience that fifth L, in whatever way we experience, whether that is through death or whether we move or whatever that might be, there is one more C that we want to hear, that we want to receive. I'll say it that way. And that is the Great Commendation. Now, again, I know most people are familiar with the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, but I've expanded these to the five great C's because I think all of these are very purposeful and really bring hope to those who follow Jesus. And of course, we want to hear the Great Commendation, which we find in Matthew 21 in the parable of the talents, where Jesus says to two of the three servants that he gives a talent towards, he says, you've been faithful with little, you'll be faithful over much. Well done, good and faithful servant. There's the commendation, but then there's an attachment to it that I'll get to in just a moment, because I overlooked the importance of that attachment for a while. So let me just briefly touch on the parable of the talents. There's three servants, and the master is going to go away. He gives each of them a talent to take care of, and one of the people, he gives different amounts of talents to different people. And the way we often think of this is that these are talents, these are skills that we have. But this was a monetary unit. This was a monetary measure that this master gave. And to one of the servants, he gave 5. For another one, he gave 2. And for a third one, he gave 1 talent. Now, you might say, well, that's not fair. Who cares what you and I think? It's the master's money. It's the master's giving that he gives. And so what is possible, we don't know what happened prior to this story. I mean, this is just a parable, right? But it's a parable with people who, I mean, these aren't real people. That's what a parable is. But we're talking about a master. So this is an adult, most likely, who has a little bit of experience, a little bit of wisdom. We have three servants, and what we don't know about the past, again, because Jesus just says, "Here's what the parable is." Well, if this was a real life situation, then those people have lived a life up to this point, and maybe the person who received the 5 talents has already proven themselves worthy of having 1 talent or 2 talents or whatever it might be. But we don't know that, and it really doesn't matter. But if we think through what potential backstory, maybe that's why he entrusted one person with more. Because again, the master says, "You have been faithful with little, I will make you faithful over much." So maybe the one who received the most had started out with little many years or opportunities before and had just grown. They had proven themselves faithful, and so now they were given more to work with. And so, but again, in any way, shape, or form, it's the master's money in this case to give to someone else to care for. So, it's not us. Well, it's not fair. Who really cares? We are just servants. But here's the big thing that most people miss on this. We think of a talent. We think, okay, what he gave somebody some money to deal with. He gave him $100. He gave him $1,000. Let's make it worth our while. He gave somebody $5,000. Let's just say that that's the amount worth of 5 talents. And then he gave somebody else a couple of talents, and a couple of thousand, and he gave somebody else 1,000, because that's a working figure. For most of us, we can think of a working figure. But here's the reality of the situation. A talent was worth 6,000 denarii, or that's a plural. Denarii is plural of denarius. A denarius was a single day's wage. So take 6,000 single days wages, and that's the amount of a talent. Now, in the United States, I think it was for 2017, the median income was like $31,000. Okay, and maybe you think that's high, maybe you think that's low. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to use a nice round number just for the sake of giving us some math. Okay, so if 31,000, let's just break that down to $30,000. The average person works 250 days a year, just give or take. Again, nice round numbers. There's 365 days in a year. There's 52 weekends. If you work 5 days times 50 weeks, that's 250. So that's where I'm getting my math. So if you were to work 250 days a year and you were to work earn $30,000, if you break that down and then you do the multiplying of times 6,000 per day, again, a talent with 6,000 worth 6,000 individual days worth of wages, that's $720,000. That's a lot of money to anybody. Now, so to one person he gave 720,000, to another person he gave 1.44 million, and to somebody else he gave $3.6 million. That's a lot of money. And one of them earned that time, earned another 3.6, another of them earned another 1.4, and the one who earned 720,000 did nothing, buried it in the ground because you're a harsh master. Now, this is where a misunderstanding of Jesus comes into play, and this is where all of this ties back together. Because if we follow me, we respond to Jesus' statement of "follow me and I will make you fishers of men," we will know that he's not a harsh master. We will know that he does not reap where he does not sow, as this lazy servant, as the master called him. We will know that's not true of Jesus. We will, if we learn to live, if we make that great confession and realize that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that he allows us to give our lives over to him, to live accordingly. If we love, in the Great Commandment, if we love God properly, God will show himself to us, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. We will get to know God intimately. We will not just know about God and facts about God, have good theology maybe even, but we will know God intimately. And so that's the love portion. Then because of that, we will begin to lead others. We will begin to follow the Great Commission and help other people to know about who Jesus is, because we have taken the time to get to know him. And when all of those things happen, then we receive that great commendation. Well done, good and faithful servant. Now, here's the truth about this parable. Jesus says those words to the first two servants. He didn't say anything different to the one who only got 2 talents, that was given 2 talents, than he did to the one who was given 5 talents. They both did the work that they were supposed to do, and he said, well done, good and faithful servant, to both of them equally. It was only the one who did not respond correctly that did not receive that commendation. And that's wonderful. But as I've said many times, we can't hear well done until we've done. We have to do in order to hear well done. So if we just say, well, God's given me some gifts, but I don't want to use them, or, God hasn't really given me anything. Yes, he has. He's given you. You are unique. You are different than any other person. Maybe that you can do the same kinds of skills. Maybe you have the same kind of talents. Maybe you have the same kind of thought processes as others, but nobody has all of that and your experiences. As John Maxwell says, wisdom doesn't come from experience. Wisdom comes from evaluated experience. So we need to evaluate our life. We need to evaluate what we have done, what we have gone through. That's a whole part of that learning, that follow me and I will make you fishers of men, is to take time to evaluate ourselves in light of Jesus so that we can serve and give back. $720,000 was 1 talent. And we just washed this away like it was just a couple of bucks. But here's the other part. You can't miss this. And I hadn't missed this, but I hadn't really grabbed the enormity of this. Because Jesus' statement to the one that was given 5 talents and the one that was given 2 talents, in both of those situations, he said, well done, good and faithful servant. But then he said something else. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, as much as I long to hear well done, good, faithful servant, as well as I long to hear Jesus say those words to me, if that's all he said, and then he said, but go away, but he says, enter into the joy of your master. Now, a part of that joy was because they were faithful. But there's a joy about Jesus that it goes beyond anything, any capacity that we have to understand. And of course, a part of the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy. The second aspect of the fruit of the Spirit that's mentioned is joy. But the idea is that we get to enter into that joy. So there are 5 great C's. There's a great calling upon us all. There is a great confession that we must make. There's a great commission that great commandment that we must follow. There's a great commission that we must live by. And if we do those things, it's all about faith. It's not about works. It's not about earning salvation. It is about responding to salvation. If we do those things, and there is a commendation that we receive that includes an entrance into the joy of our master. So yes, we need to learn, and we need to live, and we need to love, and we need to lead others to follow Jesus and start their cycle of learning and living and loving and leading others. But when all of that's done, every human that's ever been a part of this earth, save for 2 that are in the Bible, 2 that we know of, Enoch and Elijah, they didn't die, but they still left. All of us leave. And so what will you do? How will you continue to learn? How will you continue to live? How will you strive to love? How will you work to fulfill the commission before you leave, and to ultimately receive that commendation, well done, good and faithful servant, with an entrance, with the ticket, so to speak, the words of our master to say, enter into my joy. That's my encouragement for you. And it's that encouragement, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's major health issues in another way, whether it's financial struggles, whether it's emotional struggles, whether it's spiritual struggles, whether it's anything else. That is the hope that we hang our hat on as people who long to be with Jesus, as people who seek to follow Jesus, is to hear his words, well done, good and faithful servant. That could be enough, but he offers so much more. Enter into the joy of your master. Whenever life has got you down, let that be your guiding hope, that God wants you to enter into his presence, not with fear and not with trembling, but with joy, because that's what he offers us. I hope these have been encouraging to you. If you like these videos, again, I encourage you to subscribe, hit the like button, sign up for the notifications, whatever it is. And I'll continue to bring some different things next week. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to continue to do them Monday through Friday, but I'm going to shift gears and start focusing on the series that we're going to be doing at that time as well. So in the meantime, learn, live, love, lead, and eventually, yes, leave, but do so knowing that there is something greater for all of us who seek to follow our Lord. Take care.